It's considered one of the most controversial parts of the used car business. It's called a buy here, pay here dealership, and if you're not familiar with the term, you're in for a wild episode. My guest today is Tiger Okeley, the president of Oaks Motors, a 5-location buy here, pay here dealer group based out of Indiana. We discuss what is a buy here, pay here dealership, how he manages to a 40% loan default ratio, financing customers that traditional banks avoid, crazy customer horror stories, and much more. Don't forget to click subscribe so you never miss an episode. What's up, everyone? This is Car Dealership Guy. You're listening to the Car Dealership Guy podcast, which is my effort to give you access to the most unbiased and transparent insights into the car market. But before we get into the show, this episode is brought to you by AutoFi. AutoFi helps progressive dealers like you sell smarter, not harder, on your dealership website and now in your showroom too. AutoFi solves the everyday problems dealers actually face, like bottlenecks at the sales desk, customer distrust, and decision overload. And their all-new showroom solution includes deal estimation, desking, lender routing, and an F&I menu. All of this in one powerful platform that bridges the gap between the CRM and the DMS. Dealerships with AutoFi can manage the floor more efficiently, fast-track the yes, and make better lender decisions, enabling them to sell cars faster with higher satisfaction and more profit. In fact, deals with AutoFi take an average of 28 minutes from customer check-in to loan approval, and dealers are making $411 more back-end PVR per deal. Go to autofi.com/CDG to learn more. That's autofi.com/CDG and start selling smarter today. This episode is also brought to you by CDK Global. CDK Global has been empowering nearly 15,000 dealers with the tools and technology they need to build deeper relationships with customers. Their team is keenly aware of the state of dealership technology, and while many vendors promise seamless experiences between your CRM, DMS, digital retail, and fixed ops, most of these bolt-on solutions tend to break workflows and cause more harm than good. That is why CDK has launched a new dealership experience platform. This new integrated software consists of everything you need to operate a dealership efficiently while delivering an unparalleled experience to your customers. Basically, everything working together, not separate, one system to run your dealership as opposed to 10. CDK developed it with an outside-in approach, listening to dealers every step of the way. You can learn more about CDK's dealership experience platform by visiting cdkglobal.com/DXP or clicking the link in the show notes below. What the heck is a buy here, pay here dealership? I think just give us that simple context.
I think in its most simple presentation, it's access to, transportation and financing at a grassroots level that is not really served by any, what I would say, regional or national lender. Or really dealership group, right? I mean, at the end of the day, somebody needs transportation, doesn't really know the ins and outs of how to make that work, or maybe their life doesn't allow them to have a traditional credit profile, but they still need transportation. They still need to get to work. They still need to take their kids places. They still need to take mom and dad to the hospital, those types of things,
All right. How did you get into this industry? I think even like starting earlier than that, like you wake up one day, like what brings you into buy here, pay here, used car industry? Go ahead.
It's the craziest story from sometimes you go dumb luck, right? And you never know how things are going to turn out, and life gives you an opportunity, and there it is. Well, my mom started the company, and it's my brother and I now. And so, my dad worked for a major Fortune 100 company and was very successful, was one of 4 vice presidents for them, and ended up taking on a project that was not going to be successful, but he did the company thing and was terminated. And so he decided he wanted to search for something on his own. And he had a neighbor that had started a business like this, and he researched it, and he decided to commit to it. And, my brother and I went to college, and we would come back and we got exposed to it through the summers, right? We were helping out with the business, the family business, as we were kids being young adults, and had no intention of going into this industry. Lo and behold, you graduate from college, really in accounting and a finance degree. And that's the year that Wall Street laid off 40,000 guys and doing the job that I wanted to do. And so there were really no jobs to be had. And I had this experience and knew I could sell cars. And that's where it started.
When you say you knew you could sell cars, like how did you know that? By the way, I obviously I right away think about my experience. Like I remember the first time, I sold a car. I didn't think I could do it. I was actually pretty scared. I think I ended up being pretty good at it. But go ahead. What's your story?
My dad needed some help and home from school, right, for summer. And he's like, hey, you need to come to the dealership, do whatever we need you to do. And you know how it goes, right? One day everything's great. The next day, hey, we don't have any salespeople here. There's customers on the lot. Go talk to them. And I'm like, well, what do I say? Right? We'll figure it out. Right? And really, it just becomes you get to know the customer, what they're looking for, what's going on. You build some rapport, and you try to solve the needs that fit the budget. And it became a pretty easy thing. And fortunately for me, I got to get exposed to a couple of guys that, led the way and said, hey, this is how you can interact with a customer in a very directed way that makes it easy for them and easy for you to find a fit. And, the next thing you know, I had 2 or 3 summers of very successful earnings selling cars, making some extra money during school.
How much you make?
Oh, gosh. So this is back in, I'm going to say this is early 80s, right? I was three months and I made 15 grand. I was like, man, this is more money than I've ever seen in my life,
Yeah. All right. So let's get the technical definition of buy here, pay here out of the way for anyone that doesn't understand, but simply means that as a dealer, we work with third-party lenders to get loans for our customers. In your case, as a buy here, pay here dealership, you are actually doing the loans yourself, right? You are lending the money to the customer yourself, and you do that for various reasons, which we'll get into shortly. But one of the core reasons is that these customers cannot typically come to you because they cannot get financed elsewhere.
That's correct. That is correct.
All right. So for anyone that doesn't understand, that is the fundamental basis for what is known as buy here, pay here in the car business. Why is buy here, pay here so controversial in our industry?
Anytime you're dealing with a segment of the market that is perceived to be disadvantaged, I think that you have a lot of scrutiny, both by the market and by legislation, right? Rightly or wrongly. And then I think at the end of the day, you also have, because there is a group that you're serving that may be disadvantaged because they don't have access to what everybody else is calling traditional. There is some real opportunity for bad actors to take advantage of folks, So I think that the just by being disadvantaged but still needing access, and then because they're disadvantaged and there is oversight, part of that oversight is because there are some bad actors and they do some things that they shouldn't do.
Let's get that out of the way for a second. What does that mean when you say bad actors that do things they shouldn't do? What does that actually mean?
Well, I think that that there are a number of, I would say there's always challenges in legislation, right? But I think ultimately legislation is meant to, and the oversight that it's meant to give is more from these are the rules which we should play because everybody thinks that makes sense. Hopefully, right? It's not always that way, but that's really kind of what legislation is meant to do. Work within the frames of what makes sense and what is really deemed good business, right? And like anything, if you look at industry as a whole, not just our industry, there is always somebody that is trying to decide what rules they can skirt and trade opportunity for cost, right? And get a competitive advantage. And I think it's the same kind of thing in our industry, right? I mean, a classic one would be a car is worth a lot more with lower mileage on it, right? So if I go to the auction and I'm a bad actor, and I buy a car with 200,000 miles and I roll it back to 50,000 miles because it looks good. Well, what have I just done? Whoever's going to be buying that is going to be cheated, and I'm going to get the benefit because I just did something that's illegal.
I mean, that's a very deliberate type of fraud. Do you see that? Do you know if that's still happening? I mean, I remember earlier, in the earlier days in the business, that was more rampant. Nowadays, I feel like maybe there's some less of that, but do you still see that kind of deliberate fraud in the market?
I don't think it's rampant, but I think this industry is fraught with, it's easy. It's not necessarily easy to enter the buy here, pay here space because it takes so much capital.
We'll
But
get
the
into that.
auto,
Yeah.
but the auto industry itself, I mean, you can get in and out at any level, right? I mean, you could sell one car if you want. That you're in the auto industry, maybe not fully immersed, but if you sold a car, you're in the auto industry, right? That transaction nets some number, and you can decide to curb cars. So there is this wide range of opportunity for a lot of different experiences and a lot of different presentations and a lot of different executions. Now, whether it's on a global scale that becomes relevant to anybody is a different story. But I would agree with you that, the industry overall has become much better from that at a real high level, but it doesn't absolve people from that kind of stuff happening all the time.
Tell us more about your group, right? Like how many stores, what do you sell annually, vehicles? Give us some overview.
So we are 5 selling locations, 3 full service facilities that do reconditioning and customer service. 4 of our 5 locations are ex new car dealerships that we have taken over. So we have capacity to be able to sell the volume that we want and be able to recondition and service the customer base that we have. We have a corporate office that's separate, and that corporate office also houses our separate finance company. So it is 100% a separate entity, but they work just hand in hand, brother sister relationship together, because that's, you need to be able to understand the dynamic of the customer holistically to be able to really move the needle in this industry, in our belief. Some don't, but that's the way we believe it works. We roughly sell, I say 3,600 a year, have roughly 10,000 accounts that we service on a regular basis. And, that becomes the life cycle.
3,600 units. What's your average selling price?
I would say anywhere 18, 19, 20 grand is our average sell price now. Post pandemic, before that, it was a lot less, but prices are just crazy.
Those numbers were like, my gut reaction when you just said that was like, wow. Like I remember the buy here, pay here cars being like 5 to 7 grand. And it's so funny. It's so funny how just like things have shifted so much. And so you mentioned 10,000 accounts you're serving, right? So that's people that have financed through you that are paying to you. Got it. Give us an overview. Who are your customers? Like, what's the profile of your customer, credit, financially? Like, just tell us a little bit about them.
Well, I think from a profile standpoint, it's a really dynamic and fluid thing. And I would say that the biggest thing is what is the credit profile? How big is the credit profile? And I would tell you that we butt up. And I think one of the things that we do is we provide a different value proposition other than just access to credit that is attractive. So we have what we call is our certified program, which gives them access to our Ultimate Protection Plus program. And so instead of just being able to buy a car and just get financing, we look at globally, what are the things that cause our customer to maybe more often than not become unsuccessful, and not just so much from a standpoint of hey, I had a life change, right? Like I got a divorce, or let's say I lost a job, or, now I can't work because I'm disabled for some reason, or something happens, right? We can't mitigate those things to a degree. We can help if there's opportunity there, but, we can't do anything about whether, it's a bitter divorce and something bad happens, right? Or if you lose your employment and are not going to be able to get similar gainful employment. But at the end of the day, so all of our vehicles we sell with warranties. We give them access to rental fleet for warranty repairs. We try to help them on the service side with a buy one, get one oil change for the life of that warranty. We're going to give them roadside assistance during that period of time for the warranty as well. We're going to give them access to preferred customer pricing on repairs. So, off the street, we're not going to do business with somebody. We're not trying to make our service department cover our fixed overhead. Really, what we're trying to do is we subsidize our service department to help get our customers affordable repairs so they can keep their car running. If they have a catastrophic repair, we give them access to repair loans. We're going to give them the option to be able to not have collateral protection through the traditional full coverage insurance options and carry just our internal collateral protection at a much more affordable rate, so that if they have an accident, their collateral is not lost. And then at the end of the day, we also offer, all within the price of what they pay for a car, a balance waiver. So if they have a full coverage or a collateral protection loss that takes out the balance, if there's a deficiency that's left, maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, which happens all the time, that kicks in and the customer's clean and they can start fresh. And don't have a balance that they have to deal with. So they have access to all of that in our program.
Let me ask you this question. I'm sure people are listening right now. They're wondering if your customer, or some of your core customer cannot get approved by other lenders, how are you able to approve these customers and still offer all this stuff to them? Right? Everything you just mentioned, to me, it almost sounds like a premium service. How are you able to do that then?
So if you look at fundamentally how the market services what I would say our industry, it really becomes it's a commodity, right? I'm looking for the best, cleanest, low mileage vehicle, and at the end of the day, I think post pandemic it has changed a little bit and why prices are so high, but because supply is so short. But at the end of the day, it becomes a commodity because there is somebody else that has the same car or a similar car, right? And so what differentiates it? Really not much.
But how are you able to do all this profitably? That's the question.
That's the $1 million question, right? And at the end of the day, it's all around what you buy, how you sell it, what value you offer, and how you underwrite the loan. And I think the industry struggles because they go, how do you underwrite somebody that doesn't have a credit profile that says they're going to do what they need to do?
How do you do it?
And so there are lots of tools in the industry. We have a tool that we like, but at the end of the day, no software is going to tell you whether a customer is going to pay or not, right? So you've got an underwriting platform that gives you kind of a baseline, and then you have to look at the customer, their situation currently, and you really have to kind of get a take on this customer's character, and are they willing to do the things, at least up front, that you're asking them to do. And if they're not, they need to buy somewhere else. But if they're trying to make things work, if they're trying to make their life better, then we've got an opportunity, because here's where we can make a difference with this customer.
But how do you actually price that risk, right? I think that to me is like the $1 million question, because simply you have a customer, right? How are you able to price that risk? What do you go off of? What do you work off of, and how do you do that?
Well, so for us, we have traditionally been and really are still in that same vein. Um, we don't have a tiered pricing risk, right? So what we do is we say, all right, we know we have to have so much gross on a car, right? Because at the end of the day, you're taking a heavy discount for future losses. At least that's the way we do it. Some don't do that. And you have to be able to pay your overhead, right? To be able to go, okay, this makes sense from a standpoint. And then you have to be able to say, well, what your interest rate is going to be driving this much interest that you're going to collect. And that has to cover basically everything on a cash flow basis that you're laying out every month. So if you, regardless of what size that you are, you can do that with any level of car, with any level of gross, with any level of interest based upon what your cost structure is. We have chosen as an organization, and we've been in business for almost 40 years. And, at the end of the day, it's a very dynamic and fluid thing, but we've always tended to, I would say, land on the we're going to do more than less side of things. So, we basically need to be able to collect and offer as much as we possibly can to make it financially work. I don't know if I'm answering your question there is really, we're not a one size fits all, but our approach is more one size fits all from a standpoint of, the car payment is roughly the car payment. You're going to get this service. This is what we're going to do. Here's how it's going to work. And
Can you
hopefully,
give us some of that nitty gritty? Like what is the car payment? If I come in right now, what is the car payment? Obviously I'm getting a lot that you just mentioned, which I think is unique in itself, and we'll dig into that. But what is the car payment? Like, what is the interest rate?
Our average car payment is going to, and we don't do it monthly, but we do it based upon paydays. But our average is going to be $500 a month, and that you have to be able to have the ability, right? I think one of the knocks of our industry is also, sometimes they feel like you're selling to customers that shouldn't be buying cars, like they don't have any income. Well, we're not going to sell a car to a customer that doesn't have income, right? So if you don't have liquidity to be able to reasonably afford that $500 a month and be able to take care of the things that need to be taken care of, which is like maintenance and insurance and the things that just go along with everyday car ownership, then it's probably not going to work. So that's our number. There's some less than that, and there's some obviously more expensive than that, but that's really the sweet spot for us.
I fielded some questions before this, and I think that one common question I get, or I think there's two schools of thought about interest rate, and I want to hear your opinion on this, right? One side says that you're charging exorbitant interest rates, right? You're taking advantage of people, etc. Another side says these are people that otherwise would not be able to get in a car anywhere. They need transportation to maybe take the family, to school or whatever it may be. And you're simply pricing the risk it's a free market and you're pricing the risk accordingly. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Like, how do you respond to both of these schools of thought?
So I understand that school of thought, and I can appreciate the argument. And for us, we've always felt better about being under what I would call the usury law. So we don't play in the max rate. That's not where we want to be.
What's the max rate in your state?
For the most expensive loan amount, it's 21%.
What state are you in again?
In Indiana. And other states are higher than that. Other states are lower than that. But that's Indiana's top usury rate. Now, the smaller the balance, the higher the rate can go. But we don't do that. We just come in at, this is our standard offer, and our standard rate is 19.9. That's what we offer. So,
and what's the max rate on a lower balance?
Oh, it could be 36, 37, 38. I'm not sure exactly how high it goes because we just don't. That's not something that we entertain. So I wouldn't want to speak out of turn, but I know it's much more exorbitant than that, depending on, and the smaller balance, the smaller the interest charge is going to be, even though the rate is really high.
I'm out of curiosity. Is that something that you market or you publicly advertise? Because the first thing that comes to mind with me is almost like, hey, if you're anyways going to buy from a buy here, pay here dealership, you are going to potentially pay 50% less interest with me because of the internal cap that we put. It just seems to me like something that, somewhat unique in your industry, because I'm sure you can attest to this, that not every buy here, pay here dealership does what you're speaking about here, right? Not everyone puts these caps. Some people will charge 36, 37, 38%.
Absolutely, we do. And I think that Indiana is, as most markets are, Indiana's pretty competitive. But, we're not too far out of bounds in terms of it being a huge benefit. But it's certainly, to your point, it is a benefit that we're not at 21. We do disclose it, but in terms of how much bang do we get for that buck, it's not as significant as maybe what you would think.
And so when you say 19.9, is that the rate for every single customer?
It is. It is. Now we do have, if we're with our value proposition, and this is something that it's not tried and tested like the rest of our programs, but because of the way that the post-pandemic is working and the cost of vehicles and the lack of real service and what you can find out there, we have found that a lot more, what I'm going to say, credit profile moving north. So typically we don't see a lot of customers north of 625, north of 650. We start to see a lot more of them. And a lot of it is driven by the value proposition and what type of inventory we have and how affordable the payment is. And so we've started to look at some discounting on what I'm going to say is better credit profile customers, but it's not something that is so germane to the core of what we do. The most of it is 19.9.
I understand. Yeah, you're capturing some additional customers. So, and it makes sense, especially given the used car supply situation, that you'd likely attract some customers that wouldn't be your typical customer. I think on that topic of used car supply, where do you get your inventory? That's the magic question here. Where do you get your inventory?
Everybody has that question, and I think there is no answer other than, we source from the entire country. Now, you have to be able to have it make sense from what do you pay for transportation and what the costs are, and making that all work. But finding inventory that fits the model, and not only from a quality standpoint, but from a pricing standpoint, there is no easy answer.
But are we talking auctions? Are we talking
absolutely
ads on Craigslist?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, our appetite, and I think this is a lot of the competition that we have as well, same thing in the market. Our appetite is we need 400 cars a month. So we can't go buy them one at a time. You do buy them one at a time, right? But when you go, you have to look at 100, 200 to be able to get your 20 or 30, So if we don't go where there's a big pool, like an auction, whether it's physical or online, you have to be able to play in those pools and those spaces to be able to get the volume that you need.
So what's the specific sources, would you say, where you're making the most acquisitions? Like, where would you say you're getting the most vehicles from?
When you say sources, auctions,
online, Craigslist ads, Facebook Marketplace.
We don't. I would say the two platforms that we are primary on are online or in person. Auction. Yeah. We tried to do some of that. We'll buy your car. I think everybody tried that. It's very difficult. It's very challenging, and we found that it just didn't work for us from a cost benefit standpoint.
So I want to dig in more into the customer side, right? When someone stops paying, what do you do in that situation?
Well, the biggest thing that you try to do is you try to get contact, right?
Which isn't always the easy thing in this business.
it's not always easy, but at the end of the day, that's where it's at. And I think that much like much like on the sales side, you have a differentiator. That's why we have, a finance company that has a lot of customer service representatives that, that's their job, is to reach out, hopefully have a relationship with the customer, where the customer can, share and feel comfortable sharing what's going on with them. And it's a challenging relationship from a standpoint of, it's certainly not like a parent-child relationship, but it's you love the one that you're with, but at the end of the day, you can't give them everything. Our customers have demands on their dollars, and we understand that, and we're one of those demands. But transportation is so important, and there are no real, what I'm going to say, social platforms to be able to help customers make their car payments. They can get food, they can get electricity, they can get housing, they can get lots of different things, but really nothing on the transportation side. So we have to try to help them understand what their situation is, what they can do, what they can't do, what other forms of opportunities do they have to help them through this rough spot, so that we can maintain a good relationship. Because at the end of the day, not paying your car payment is just not going to work for us. But communication is the key, and we try to do everything that we possibly can to foster that communication. All of the programs that we talked about earlier, if they can help with whatever's going on, we try to make that a reality. And at the end of the day, if the customer either won't or can't communicate with you, or they won't or can't pay, then you have no choice but to collect that car on a repossession, which is part of the business.
Two questions there. Do you have an in-house repo team? Do you outsource that?
We do outsource that, and we have we have a company that we have a relationship with. It's one of the areas that we see as another one of those compliance problem areas. Litigation or bad actors, whether they have insurance or not, that's important. But how you interact with that customer in that moment is really, really important. And so we have a long-standing, very close relationship with a company that does it the way we would like to do it, understands that, we need to be above board. It needs to be safe. It needs to be compliant. It just needs to be the right way, so that we don't cause ourselves or them or anybody else undue distress.
I can't say I'm surprised. I mean, I feel like also from a brand perspective, to have that not be, directly linked to your brand, something positive as well. It's not, a positive or a highlight of the car ownership experience for anyone that has to go through that. So it doesn't surprise me. What percent of customers would you say have their vehicle repossessed? And then if you could compare that to, let's say pre-2020, like would love to understand today what is that percentage, but how that's also evolving given stimulus checks, all the craziness we had. Now consumer savings are, depleting. So what are you seeing there?
I would say that my real short comment, and then we can get into detail, is, what it was pre-COVID, it's kind of balancing back to post-COVID, but then there was a blip through, that COVID area that, people were getting a lot of stimulus, as you said, right? And it makes things a little easier. And then when it stops, it makes things a little worse. And then it takes a little while to get back to equilibrium. So I think things are starting to get back to equilibrium, but at the end of the day, it's, I think that that 40% loss on, how many make it to the end, 40% don't. And, at the end of the day, we try to mitigate that as much as we can, but that's really what the number is.
So you sell 10 cars, 6 make it till the end, 4 don't?
Yeah.
Okay. And then with those 4 cars, you take them back, you can resell those cars. You're like, what is the rough? Maybe, of course, maybe. Let's preface that. Agreed. But what would you say is the rough utilization you could get out of one car, right? Like, can you resell, I think, 5 more times on average, 2 more times, 1 time?
I don't know that I have what I would call as a good average for you. We don't look at it that way. I think at the end of the day, we are exposed to a significant number of our losses. The car either disappears, or the car is wrecked, or the car is so abused that there's nothing left. Now, certainly, the shorter the leash from a standpoint of, let's say the customer had the car 2 months and it was normal, and they just decided that, hey, I needed a car for 2 months and I wasn't going to pay. Then, maybe that car is okay and it can go back through reconditioning and make sure that it meets the mark and be resold. But a lot of times, you get a car back in 2 weeks and you're like, man, what happened to this car? It's just not going to make the trip again, and it just has to go. For whatever reason, whether it's been hit on all four sides, or an ex decided to put sugar in the tank, or, drained the oil unknowingly.
Whoa. Sugar in the tank?
Oh,
what is
man,
this?
Are you kidding me? Yeah, there's all kinds of, people are people, right?
You got to give us one or two stories. Come on. You got to give us.
So I would tell you that probably the craziest story, and this is a little fuzzy, but I'm going to get the highlights for you.
Give me the highlights.
This is probably 2 or 3 years prior to COVID. But so we had a guy that was going through a bitter divorce, and she ended up getting the vehicle, and somehow miraculously the brake lines ended up being cut. And the truck ended up, fortunately nobody was hurt. But we got drug into that dynamic, because obviously, whoever did the cutting didn't want to go to jail for, attempted murder or whatever the charge was going to be. And so obviously it's the dealership's problem, because they sold me a car that was bad and blah, blah, blah. But no, I'm telling you, that was a crazy one.
So you get a call and they tell you that. What do they tell you? They say, hey, my car's not working, or the car is just not braking. What's the story?
We have a pretty robust, service process, right? So if you have an issue, we're going to be responsive, because we understand people need transportation, and most of the time they just want to put the key in and make sure it goes, right? They don't have time to, fix it or wait, or sometimes not even time for oil changes, right? But so we get a call, and immediately there's blame. Hey, you guys did something to my truck, and blah blah blah, and we had it actually towed in, and we're looking at this thing and taking pictures, and we're like, no, this is an inside job. Somebody literally tried to make this go bad for somebody. And essentially the truck got basically part of evidence. The police were involved, and they got it. It was crazy, right? But at the end of the day, it was a service situation turned into something bigger, because the customer had something that was going on outside of us. We got pulled into the loop just because the nature of, we sold it and we brought it in to, figure out what's going on. And then lo and behold, this is what we find.
I'd have to imagine that happens pretty often. Maybe not with brake lines, but with other ways.
With other things. It's, hey, life is life, right? But you see so many things with life, and nothing surprises me anymore. Let me just say that.
I can only imagine. Tell me about, high level for a second, on the business. Do you target a specific, IRR, or, do you have a certain profitability metric per car that you're targeting? And what is it?
I think at the end of the day, that's a very dynamic situation too. And I think the reason why it's dynamic is all the metrics that you used to have changed. And the reason why they have changed is because you have the cost of funds escalating so quickly, right? So unless a company is debt free, then it becomes not an issue. But the other issue becomes, the car that you used to typically buy and what that investment was and what that risk that you were putting on the street has more than doubled. And honestly, you've gone backwards in terms of quality. So you're taking more risk, not only with more money on the street, but you're taking more risk because the collateral that you're putting on the street is not as good. And it's not because you don't want to put as good a quality of vehicle on the road. It's just that's all that's available. And so people still need transportation and they need something they can afford. And so we've got to figure out how to make that work. So I think that the best answer that I can give you is that metric is in a state of flux, and I don't know where it's going to land. But certainly you have to be profitable, right?
The average used car dealer today is making about $3,500 front to back, right? So on the car plus F&I. During the pandemic, I think that average was closer to $5,000 with more profit on the front, on the actual car. So where are you in that ballpark range, right? As the buyer, like that's used car, new car is sort of similar to that today, right? Where's buy here, pay here on the spectrum? Are you making, $4,500 a car? Are you making $2,500 a car?
So I guess I would have to ask you a deeper question to really understand what is that question, and the reason why. Let me give you some information as to why I tell you that, right? Because your approach that you just gave is, I sold a car front and back. This is my number, and I'm done.
And you have the lending company as well.
So here's the difference, right? I sold a car, and I got paid a down payment, which probably didn't even cover sales tax. I have to pay for my car. I have to pay my person to sell it. I have to pay for my building that sold it. I have to pay my insurance. I have to pay my lights. I have to pay my taxes. I have to pay all these things. Then I sell it to a sister company that has no cash, and they're trying to collect some money. And so I don't get paid until the customer pays us, and not just pays us one payment, but I don't know until that transaction ends how much did I get paid for that one transaction. And then I have to roll up all of the transactions together and go, this is what I made. And it might be 3-4 years later, and I have to take in all of those 3-4 years worth of cost to go, did it make sense? Right. And so it's hard for me to go, what exact question are you answering? Right.
I totally fair. I agree. You're right. So, right, the context here is you are also the lender, right? You're not just a dealer that is maybe selling this loan right away to a third party lender. You're booking your profit, you're done. And so, like, how do you manage the business, or like, what is the profitability metric that you track? Is it lifetime value of a customer over 4 or 5 years? Like, is it in, IRR? Like, what do you guys track over, the length of a consumer sale and loan?
Sure. Well, I think that's the real challenging thing of this industry is you get different looks at it, right? So when you're driving down the road, you see that you're driving 35 miles an hour, and then sometimes you're driving 70 miles an hour, and then sometimes you're 5 miles an hour, right? But you're still going to the same place, but you're going different speeds. You don't know how long it's going to take you to get there because you don't know how much traffic is going to be, or what's going to happen along the way. And that's kind of this, right? And so to get back to your point, there is real no, this is where you're good. There's what I'm going to call is the white lines, right? And you look at obviously, what kind of gross are you putting on for what kind of cost that you have? That's one metric. Then you have to be looking at, okay, how much interest am I collecting on the portfolio to be able to cover my expenses? Then you have to be looking at, okay, what is the reserve for bad debt and how fast is that bad debt being materialized? So you're having to look at static pools of all of these loan pools that you put on month by month by month, year by year by year. And you have to be able to look at all of those things. And at the end of the day, you have to be able to collect enough cash to be able to pay all of your expenses, service your debt, and to be able to provide enough new money to fund those deals, unless you have a credit source that just is going to give you access to unlimited funds to continue to grow this thing until it blows up. And most of the time, you don't want that, right?
Wait, the source of funds, is it all in-house retained earnings from your business, or do you also raise funds and debt from other sources?
So we have a warehouse line, and a significant number is retained earnings or related shareholder debt.
So the capital that you do raise, where do you typically raise that from? Like what sources?
It would be banks. It would be more, there are a handful of banks that are interested in our space historically, and some are coming, some are going. And that's just part of the industry. But certainly the challenges that are in the industry have some banks concerned, others see it as opportunity. It's like everything, right? Some dealers see it as a concern, some dealers see it as an opportunity. Just depends on what you see.
You mentioned, we spoke about like lifetime value of a customer and just, having the car sales, the lending business and everything intertwined. So Drive Time, right? Drive Time, the big auto retailer, is famously known for having launched the used car dealerships in order to put paper on the road, right? They were a bank. They wanted to put loans on the road, and their widget, right? Their foray into that was, let's sell cars. That'll be our source. Do you view your business similarly? Like, is your core competency being a bank, a lender? Or is it not that way? You're actually a dealer and a lender on the side. Like, how do you view yourself? What is your identity?
That's a great question, and that's an interesting question. And I probably would have said prior to COVID, it would be more as a lender. But I think that the challenge is with the sales and the service. What are you selling? How are you servicing? What's that look like to support? It really is. I mean, it's always been a three-legged stool, right? I mean, stools don't stand if they don't have three legs, right? But it's even more that now. So we are. I mean, I can't imagine us not having our hands on the service side. I can't imagine not having our hands on the sales side, and I can't imagine us not having our hands on the financing and the underwriting and the collection side. So it's less of a, we see ourselves as a lender and we just create notes on the sales side. It really is much more a
It's all one
holistic.
ecosystem.
Absolutely. And communication and teamwork, and I mean, being able to understand left hand, right hand, and really be like on it is super important.
Yeah. And you know what led me to that question as well, as I'm thinking in the used car business, many times used car dealers, from my experience and the ones I'm aware of, and many times they actually run service as a cost center. Service, doesn't turn a profit. It's really just meant there to serve, the variable operations, the sales. Obviously, that's completely the opposite in the new car business, where service is, the breadwinner. But that led me to thinking that, are you putting these cars on the road where it's just like, let me break even, I'll accrue the interest in the lending company. That is way more important for me. Or is there like some sort of a balance, which, you've answered. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, that's completely it. That's how we see it.
One thing that you didn't tell me, but I saw on Google, and I want to actually point out because I think it's commendable, is I saw that you donated recently $94,000 to 7 charities in Indianapolis. So again, going back to stigma, I feel like the average person that hears buy here, pay here is just doesn't think about $100,000 donation to, to philanthropic giving and stuff like that. Have you always been into philanthropy as a group? Is this something new for you? Like, can you just give us some background why you chose to do this?
Sure. So we actually, so that was just last year's donation. And so for the last 10 years, it's not quite $1 million for the last 10 years, but it's real close. It's like 950 grand or something like that we've donated. And our history is, the company was founded and helping normal folks, and nothing high society, nothing fancy. I mean, this is a grassroots customer. It's a grassroots family, and people are just trying to make it work. And I mentioned before that we just don't see that there is access for anybody to get assistance on the car front, right? Car payment, cars, it's just not there. And so, what is available is food pantries and shelter and life skills and addiction recovery, and the list goes on and on, right? I mean, that people have access to make their lives better. And so this is a for-profit, and we are not a charity, but we do recognize the role that those charities play in our customers' lives that are having difficulties. Because I would tell you, 80% of our customers are just like you and me. We go to work, everything's great. I just don't have that traditional access to normal credit, or I've decided that I've grown and I do, but I really appreciate what this company that I've grown up with does for me, and I like that, and I'm going to keep doing it, right? So those folks that have issues that are either our customer or anybody else in society, we have an appreciation and understanding that sometimes life is hard. And so we as an organization commit to, helping the way we can. And obviously we have to be successful to be able to do that. And we have been successful. And this is by no means, a sad song, but things are different this year, and our team, we had to cut our charitable giving by 80%. We're still giving, but we have to make sure that we're taking care of business, that we're taking care of our customers, that we're doing the things that we need to do to take care of our team, that we can afford all of these programs that we offer our customer. And there's a dynamic out there, right? And so we just have to be more mindful about how we spend, the decisions that we make, the things that we do, so that we can provide consistent benefit and value for our market and for our customer and for our team members, today, tomorrow, next week, next year. And, but it is a big part of what we do on the charity side. I hope that we get back to that.
When you say things are different this year, like, what is that insight into the market? Like, what's changed for you? Is it lower profitability, lower sales, both? What's different?
All of it. So I think that, we used to be able to serve a much broader range of customer, but with the cost of inventory, you just can't take as much risk, right? And so there's a part of the market that gets left unserved that hopefully at some point in time we can continue to serve that market, but underwriting has to be better, right? We have to have higher income requirements. We have to have less maybe of a circumstantial situation. We have to have, stronger character interviews in the underwriting process, right? So there's customers that maybe could have bought from us in the past that can't now, because
which is wild to think about, right? That like you are, the place for them for quote unquote a second chance, and even you have to turn away some people. That's a real indication on just the state of affordability. Not so much
I want to be clear. It's not as much a turn away, and us say we can't help you, but the way that we can help you is probably prohibitive to the customer's alternatives, right? So we're going to be able to take risk, and we have no problem taking risk because that's what we do. But to get the risk to be at an acceptable level, let's say instead of $500 that we needed on this transaction as a down payment and everything seems okay, maybe that number is now $3,000 or $4,000, so that we can tip the scales to say, okay, you have an opportunity to be successful in the way that we see it, and our risk is mitigated more because you're outside what we see is what the new norm is for what our transaction looks like.
Well, I think you're doing overall, it seems like you're running a very tight ship and you're pretty well rounded, because I looked at all your reviews, which I was surprised to see everything above 4-star in all of your stores, responses from management. Like, it's clear that you're on top of the customer service game here. And it's very, very respectable, because I've seen some examples that are not as great in the industry. So you think you're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Tiger, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
Absolutely.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.